What's up, party people? It's Kristen Hancock. It's summer, and I'm so excited to have this live stream with you all today that I wore my new Ecology branded rainbow sunglasses. I just got a box of like 100 of them because that was the minimum order. So if you're a member and you have referred people to join Ecology, you're getting a pair of these little suckers in the mail pretty soon. Very exciting for you. You'll get some other goodies in there as well. So if we've got any members in the chat, let us know. I see Lanice here, Ash. Yeah, I love the shades too. They're so great. They're so fun. I'm definitely saving a pair for myself. The only way you can get them is by referring someone to Ecology. I am not giving away my non-functioning rhinestone DIY microphone because it's one of a kind and it is priceless, as you can tell by the sticky paper that I used. Let us know in the chat where you are from, where you're joining us from. I love the cool shades emojis everyone's using. This is awesome. I am about to bring in two of my friends and colleagues and peers, and they're about to be your friends and colleagues and peers, to chat about all the things that internal communicators can learn from our colleagues in marketing. Chuck Gose is in the chat already wreaking havoc. Yes, this is his office. And of course, he would like to note how cool it is. It is very dude. There's a lot of bobbleheads here and a lot of footballs, basketballs, etc. Welcome to it. Focus on the shades, people. That's what we're here for. All right. Let's bring in our guests today, Andrea and Chris. Hello, welcome. I need to take these shades off because I can't see anything. So hi, everyone.
Hello.
All right, we're going to do some intros. We've got lots of people in the chat. Rhonda's here from Chicago. We love Chicago. Everyone loves Chicago. Anita's here from Washington, D.C. A lovely addition. Ash is here from the San Francisco Bay Area. Lanice is here. Oh, wait, I'm clicking all the wrong things. Hey, Rhonda, what's up? All the cool, the chat is wild, friends. The chat is crazy. Lanice is here from Virginia. She thought she was escaping the Vegas heat. You're not, there's no escaping any heat in America for the next several decades. Welcome everyone to this amazing session. I'm going to do, we have someone from hi, Jennifer from Kalamazoo. Love it. Omaha, Buffalo. We're covering all the ground today. We are going to take tips from these two marketers, and this is what unites Andrea and Chris and I, is a lovely scenario I would like to share with all of you in the interest of vulnerability on the internet. About a year ago, maybe more, my shiny object syndrome raged full force. Long story short, I was very easily convinced that I required a very expensive piece of marketing software, which shall remain nameless because it's not their fault entirely. So I purchased this piece of software for an obscene amount of money. And a few months into it, I thought, this seems like maybe I don't need this. Maybe I purchased a Cadillac Escalade and I needed a used Honda Civic. I learned this from a conversation I had with Chris Tyson at Debbie's Daughter's Bakery and Cafe in Noblesville, Indiana, where he looked at everything and he was very kind and very polite and very supportive. And I learned that maybe a Google Sheet was just fine for me before then. Months later, Andrea and I started working together on some marketing strategy and gimmicks and all these things. And all this to say, both of these people are absolute marketing geniuses in their own right. They are both consultants, agencies. They are go-tos. They are resources for everyone who is in this chat today and who is using I made fancy banners. If you would like to know more about Andrea's work, tinytall.co, unicoi.social. This is how you know both of these people are in marketing, because neither one of them has a .com email address, because Chris's company is bullpen.consulting. So we're full creativity is on display here today. Chris and Andrea, welcome. Welcome to everyone else who's in the comments. We're going to get into this. I will let everyone know right off the bat. If you have questions about external marketing in general, or if you have questions about external marketing as it relates to internal communications, both of these people are happy to answer all of your questions. I'm not going to answer any of them because I'm the one who spent too much money on marketing software that I didn't need. So I've learned where my limits are. Andrea, why don't you do a quick intro of yourself, where you are located, what your beautiful artwork is in the background, and my surprise question of the day, what is your favorite marketing campaign of all time?
Ooh, that's quite the question to start with.
I know it is.
So my name's Andrea Parrish, and I am located just outside of Spokane, Washington, and Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I'm an equidistant drive from both of them, but I'm on the Washington side. Tiny Tall Consulting is what I do all of my marketing and social media consulting under, and that's because I am 6'4" and the second shortest in my family. So Tiny Tall ended up being my nickname for a long time, and then I, of course, with my extensive marketing and branding experience, spent zero time branding my own business and ended up going with Tiny Tall Consulting. And then Unikoi Social is a social media engagement tool that I am currently about to open out for a round of actual startup funding. So I'm very excited about that. But and then as far as my favorite marketing campaign of all time, I would say the Super Bowl Oreo tweet. Because
Epic.
yeah. So when the power went out at the Super Bowl, it took Oreo less than 5 minutes to create, approve, and post a tweet saying you can still dunk in the dark. And that was pretty
That's a
early after
sunglasses moment for Oreo.
exactly, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it just I have used that ever since as proof that anyone who says we could never get that approved quickly on social, that there is usually a way to do that, even if you're in a highly regulated industry. Not that Oreos is, but
Yep.
still.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Chuck Ghost is here, says you can't teach height. That's his favorite phrase. Actually, Chris probably knows that about him. It's his favorite phrase. And you've
Well
got
aware.
Andrea, you've got a fan club. Andrea Parrish is incredible. I know, Pam. That's why I invited her today. So I'm welcome to it. We're going to get matching jackets. It's going to be awesome. All right, Chris, you are up.
Yeah, in the honor of you can't teach height, Andrea's a little taller than me, but not by much. So Kristen's the tiniest of the tall
That's
folk in
true.
here today.
That's
So
true.
maybe the key to good marketing is taller, right? I don't know.
Maybe.
So we should be asking that question on resumes and stuff now. Yeah. So Chris Tyson, I am the founder of Bullpen Consulting, as you see. And no, we did not coordinate colors. I just happened to have purple on today, and it just worked out. So super cool. Similar to Andrea, I'm not really on the big creative front, and baseball is my thing, and so hence the name Bullpen. So you can call, if you're not familiar with American baseball, they have a whole area where they have people that are just waiting to be called into play, and they have various abilities and specialties, and as do I. So hence the name Bullpen Consulting. You make one call, and we can help you with some of that stuff. So today we're talking all things internal comms and marketing strategy, but yeah, that's kind of my jam. So excited to be here and to help you all out.
Love it. Favorite marketing campaign?
Yeah, that's the one that kind of instantly comes to mind that's been going on for years. If any of you have either traveled through Indianapolis or from Indianapolis, they have a campaign with the shortened name of the city, which is INDY for Indy, and especially in the airport, they have this where they have the ND and the Y in a sculpture statue format, and then you make the I when you stand there, and you take selfies and pictures. And so any of the big events, and especially because Indianapolis hosts lots of mainly sporting events, but all kinds of conferences, and people come from all over the country, kind of like you all today, come visit the city and are sharing that everywhere. And that's been going on. Gosh, I couldn't even tell you how many years now that's been a thing, and it's still going strong. And user generated content, super cool, and has had some interesting memes and funny things, as I'm sure you can imagine, come out of that as well. But no, that's been a long standing one around here. That's really good.
That is a good one. I myself have done the I'm the
Yeah.
I. Yeah,
Yeah,
I've done it.
exactly.
Ash's favorite marketing campaign of all time, Dove's Real Beauty campaign. That's a good one too.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks for asking, Ash. My favorite marketing campaign of all time was when it was also a Super Bowl commercial imported from Detroit with Eminem when they launched the Chrysler. I believe it was the Chrysler 200. Oh, the choir. I love Detroit. Everything about it. Sometimes I watch it when I need to feel inspired on YouTube. So there you go. All right, yeah, it is. It's. I just love it. It's one of my favorites. Okay, let's get into the meat of this, because the three of us have had a conversation already about how marketing can help inform some of the strategy and some of the creativity for folks who are in internal comms. If you are brand new I see a lot of members in this in the chat here. If you are brand new and you're like, what the heck is Icology? We are a community for internal communicators. And we're the most fun, I think. I'm biased, shamelessly. And we do things like this. We do in-person events. We've got one at the end of August in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. You should come. And we also do all kinds of really amazing virtual stuff for our members within the community. Member chats. We bring in experts to chat about different topics. We've got a mentorship program, a book club, all of the fun things that you would love to talk about. So we would love to have you. I want to start our conversation here with the concept of strategy, which I know it's a big term. There are so many people in the internal comms world that I see online. I'm not going to say whining, because that's the wrong word. Lamenting, maybe venting about how they either find themselves being too tactical and they need to be more strategic, or they are upset because the perception is that internal communicators are only there to take orders and do as they're told and not there to build strategy. I would love to start talking about how in the marketing world, there's a parallel there. There is the execution, right? There's the tactical execution and the strategy. Some of us buy software before we look at the strategy of things. So maybe I will toss this to Chris, because you were the first person I talked to about this. Before any of us, internal, external, marketing, comms, whatever, jump into either a new tool or an execution of something, a tactical element, what is that first piece that we need to start asking ourselves when it comes to strategy?
Yeah, great question. For me, it's always going back to what you're working backwards, essentially, right? So it's really easy to, especially if you're internal comms and somebody else is telling you things to do, or kindly, voluntold asking you to do things, you want to jump, right? And it's probably a boss, or even if you are, everybody's got a boss, right? So you want to start doing something, right? You get excited that somebody's asked you to do something, they're engaged. And sometimes people who are engaged are almost your worst enemy, right? You would figure it's opposite. So you start to run with them, and then you don't, take a step back. So always starting with the end game is my approach to that. Andrea, I don't know if you've got any kind of similar approach to it, but.
Yes and no. So I actually am one of the weird ones when it comes to strategy. Oh dear, already? We're only 15
minutes.
No. So it's a twofold answer. One, yes, you should always have an idea of where you're going. I'm an old school debater. I grew up in high school and college doing speech and debate because I was that kind of a nerd. And I did a form of debate where the question you always asked is, how are we measuring? How are we judging this debate? What's the value you're measuring it on? And what's the criteria you're measuring it on? And that's kind of where I like to start when it comes to strategy is, okay, what are we actually trying to, what is the value? What is the thing we are trying to achieve? And how are we measuring that success? And then sometimes, this may be because I come from social media too, you just have to throw stuff at the wall until you figure out what works and what doesn't. Because it is so easy to get stuck in analysis paralysis, where you're trying to figure out which software to buy, or you're trying to figure out how to do something that you never actually just try to do the thing. So you should always know where you're headed. You should know how you're judging the success. And you should also be willing to try something and just see how it works. Because Kristen, even though, yes, you bought the expensive software, and even though, yes, it didn't work out, I do want to point out that you also learned a heck of a lot about what you actually want and need. And it has informed a lot of what you've done since.
Yes.
And yes, it was an expensive lesson, but you also learned a heck of a lot. So there's nothing wrong with a spaghetti approach as long as you have some idea of how you're measuring. Should the spaghetti stick to the wall or should it stay hard? Like, figure that out and then just start throwing it.
Lanice likes the spaghetti approach here.
Yeah,
I didn't know this was called.
Yeah, and it's good too to, you know, if typically internal comms, you're going to have a better read, right? Unless if you're an outside agency or consultant, sometimes you don't understand the inner workings, the politics, the budgets, right? Where things are at. So you'll have a better idea if you're able to step back and say, time out, let's do strategy. Or to Andrea's point, you just got to run. Like you'll have a pretty good read on what, you know, what the internals allow for. But really, you know, being able to, again, strategy doesn't have to be completely stop and go back and go angle, right? You can still be strategic and ask some questions within the framework of, hey, start doing stuff, but have at least in the back of your mind where you're going with it, because you'll probably get asked at some point by somebody those questions, right? So even just having a little sidebar with yourself and a little note stock to kind of, you know, orient yourself sometimes can help. It doesn't have to be a complete step back, hire an Andrea, right? Call Kristen and ask questions. It can be, hey, let's just take some notes down before we go run too far. So
I'm
honestly,
go ahead, Andrea.
I was just going to say that's also a really good CYA factor, because I know in internal comms a lot too, you're sometimes asked, okay, you did the thing, but can you tell me, was it successful or not? And so you tell them all of these things about, okay, it got this many opens and it got this many views and we got this. And the person you're talking to says, yeah, but how many people actually filled out the survey? And it's because you're judging it on two different things. So if you kind of make a note and you say, this is what we're doing and this is why we're doing it, then you can go back to that when you're asked to measure how it succeeded and actually say, hey, yeah, you're right. It was important that people filled out the survey and that wasn't the goal here. So if that was your goal, we need to talk about how I need to be involved in that conversation earlier.
This transitions really well. I like to do a little acronym messaging for people on the bottom there. This transitions really well into an uncomfortable conversation that I would like to have with two marketing people. And I would also love input from people who are in the chat who from what I can see, are largely internal comms people. But marketing people, please chime in. It seems like there is a perception, and I think it is only a perception, amongst internal comms people that we are either not at the table or we are not asked for the higher level thought process, opinion, strategy, things like that. And I feel like that's not the same perception in marketing. Do we think that's because marketing's just been around longer, people are more comfortable with it? Do we think it's because marketing might attract, oh, this is uncomfortable, I'm saying it anyway. Do we think that marketing might attract a more confident, aggressive, assertive type of person into the role? I don't know. I would love the chat's going to be wild on this. Anyway.
So this actually fits really well. So Chuck just pointed out that we met at an internal comms event because I was undercover, and yes and no, because the fact is marketing, at least the marketing that I have experienced, we have had those exact same conversations time and time again. Okay. And it also happens a lot with social media, because you will have so many social media people who are doing the execution, as much as I want to call them executioners, but people who are executing social media strategy, who are the last ones to get pulled into a crisis comms meeting when the issue got raised on social media. Or, there's all of that stuff that happens constantly. So is there a perception? Yeah. Does it fit with marketing? Yes, absolutely. And the fact is, it's really easy for any department to feel like you are being an order taker when you're not saying, or you're not given the freedom to say, so why are we doing this and what goal are we reaching towards? Because at the end of the day, really good marketing is really good communications. And really good communications does 90% of the lifting for you when it comes to marketing. And so at the end of the day, you're really doing the same kind of work with two very distinct audiences. And I think that's really where that minor separation between internal comms and marketing exists, is just, it's two different audiences, but you're doing the same kind of work.
Yeah. I think it's an interesting question in that, to Andrea's point, the exact same questions and problems and perceptions raised in marketing channels and marketing conferences and networking as well. I think it's just to the point where, marketing is very hard to quantify and talk about, right? And it's hard for executives to understand. And so that's why you don't get seats at those tables, because in marketers, it's our problem, right? We don't do a good job on the communication front. I think the hard thing for internal comms is it seems easier, right? Oh, we're just going to send out a message or a newsletter or make a video. And it seems like to the person giving the tasks or asking, it seems like a thing that isn't so far away from their world, right? Where maybe if you're sales or operations in the C-suite, typically, right, marketing is this really weird thing they don't understand. And so they're going to just kind of nod their head and say, yes, you might get a little more leeway. Whereas, again, internal comms is something that's more attainable for them. So, but don't, that's where the internal comms people can push back, right? And say, hey, this might feel like this is only this or this is only that. But asking those questions, not being afraid. And again, that's an interesting question, Kristen, of who kind of gravitates towards comms and marketing roles, right? Where I definitely think marketing people are maybe more apt to ask those questions, and that, again, you don't want to make somebody feel stupid or like they don't know what you're asking them, but you also have to kind of uncover that the thing that they ask you for isn't really what they're getting towards or what they need. To kind of back up towards the previous thing about strategy, right? If you're giving a task and you're giving a thing to go do, it doesn't have to be a big long step back strategy session, but it can be a question or two, again, to always orient, like Andrea said, and orient yourself to what's the end goal. Like, hey, I heard that you said you want me to send this thing. Read it back to them and say, are you meaning that we're trying to do this with that, or what are we trying to accomplish with that? Happy to do it. I just want to better understand what your goals are. And doing that once or twice, while it might feel really uncomfortable or really weird, gives you that, you'll start to get your seat, right? And you'll probably produce better work too, right? So you don't, I was at an event recently where there was about 20 or 30 different organizations as part of this community group, and they had brought in a consultant, and they were doing the step back, the big strategy. They took the time, and halfway through the session, somebody raised their hand and said, I've been a part of this similar thing in the past, and the questions that we're asking and the answers we're giving isn't what this organization, this funding organization, cares about, because I've submitted, somebody said I've submitted before, and they're going to ask us this, this, and this. And nobody has set that groundwork up front to know, right, what we were even trying to accomplish. We were being strategic. We were asking questions, but we were all just doing, to Andrea's point, we were doing stuff for the sake of doing it and not understanding where we were going. So always having that as your base of where you're going to start before you start doing the activity can get you that seat that you're looking for sometimes.
Well, and honestly, in my mind, the table is like the cool kids table in the lunchroom. Like, it exists for everyone who isn't sitting at it or thinks that they aren't sitting at it. But if you end up going and talking to the people who supposedly are sitting at the table, they're probably not thinking that they're the cool kids table. And they probably are just as worried about it as everybody else. Like, I was a debate nerd and a band geek, and I thought there was no way I was considered the cool kids table. And then I went back home a year or so ago for something for my mom, and somebody I had never talked to in high school walked up to me and they were like, oh my gosh, you have no idea how cool I thought you were in high school.
See?
And it blew my mind.
Yeah.
So it's
relative.
like everybody thinks you're not at the table, when in the reality is, if there's that perception, that table probably does not actually exist. And to steal something from Kristen and Chuck, build your own freaking table.
Yeah, exactly. Zane,
Yeah,
I think Zane hit the nail on the head here. We would be surprised at how many people, regardless of the department they are in, feel like they are not at this magical table. I've heard people in HR say it, finance, IT, every single industry department in your organization has had moments where they're like, why weren't we included on this? So I feel like collectively today, we can all make a pact to stop complaining about not being at a table that doesn't exist. I would love for that to be our commitment to each other moving forward. So let's all agree to that. Also, there's a whole conversation in the chat about what the table is. So it's getting very existential in the chat. I do want to come in to bring up something here that both Bella and Jennifer have brought up in the chat. And the concept is that marketing brings in the money and internal comms spends the money. Or Jennifer has said something very similar. Is there a perception that marketing leads to revenue so that it's serving a different purpose? What I would love to know from both of you is, first of all, is that true? And second of all, how can internal communicators take that and use it to our advantage in some way? Like, can we learn the lesson from marketing that marketing has seemingly convinced people like, hey, we're leading to revenue. Can internal communicators also lead to revenue somehow instead of being seen as a cost center?
Yeah, I think it's a different question than revenue, right? It goes back to the first thing Andrea said is what are you trying to accomplish? And in internal comms, revenue, right, can be process related, it can be ops related, it can be, streamlining certain things. So it's again understanding what you're measuring. And then then you can understand, right, can I do it with a Google Sheet or do I need an expensive tool, right? So you have to sort of understand. And that goes back to what we were just talking about on that getting the seat at the table question is just ask, right? Like what, yes, you told me to, again, do a thing. Are you trying to do this because I'm hearing you say this? Is that because we need to improve X, Y, and Z? And then there's your measurement, there's your, strategic North Star. And then again, now you know how to report back on what they were trying to accomplish, right? And so it's either dollars in or dollars saved at the end of the day, right? And if internal comms isn't going to be a thing that brings dollars in, that's okay. It can be a thing that saves dollars, right? There's some, and I know there's got to be plenty of data around the different ways that internal comms can help that, right? And if you don't already have access to those things, I'm sure Kristen and Chuck and Ecology and many different networks and reports exist out there, kind of benchmark what those things can do. So yeah, use that third party validation. If you're struggling internally to get the seat and get people to listen to you, use an Ecology and have a report that says, hey, when we do email and comms in this way, or we have this kind of outreach to our staff, we get X, Y, and Z benefit from it, and use somebody else instead of you always being the one kind of having to drive that too.
So I'm going to get, first of all, Chris, absolutely. Like, yes, that I think you put it very, very well. And I am going to get super inside baseball here because,
nice.
Yeah. So marketing,
do we have baseball
is often
behind me somewhere?
Has to be.
There's got to be baseball somewhere in here. Wait, I found something. Okay, we've got two. We've got cool. Savannah Bananas and hang on.
Skyline Chili Trophy from Cincinnati.
We actually have not one but two, but I can only grab one. Eric Davis bobbleheads.
Nice.
Okay,
nice.
carry on with your baseball. Yes.
Yes. So that is literally the most I know about baseball. So I hope there's not an expectation of more metaphor. Okay, marketing is often seen as monolithic by people who are not in marketing, which is absolutely understandable. I mean that somebody says, "Oh, you're in marketing," and they mean marketing is marketing is marketing is marketing.
Got it.
When in reality, marketing is public relations, marketing is communications, marketing is creative, marketing is advertising, marketing is design, marketing is a lot of different things. And there is exactly one part of marketing that unquestionably brings in revenue. And that is, or at least brings in measurable, immediate, understandable by every C-suite person revenue. And that's advertising, where you measure a direct ROI. Because if somebody can say, we paid $5,000 in advertisements and we can show how that directly led to $10,000 in sales, then you are measuring a 2x ROI, return on investment. For every other single part of marketing, that exact same argument that you all spend money and we don't see the benefit of it comes up often. That comes up daily in social media. That comes up daily when you're talking about branding. Because branding is so very often seen as a cost center and is one of the first places to get cut when people are worried about budgets, even though branding is what makes every other part of your business more efficient and more effective. But because it doesn't have a direct ROI, people get really, really weird about it. So yes, marketing is seen as bringing in the dollars, but in reality, it's your advertising people that can show a direct, usually, hopefully positive ROI that are seen as that. And every other part of marketing is usually having that exact same argument. Because yes, it would be amazing to be able to spend $5,000 on a really good branding video, but unless you can get somebody to sign off on that, it's the exact same argument. So you probably have more people understanding and appreciating that concern in your marketing department or your comms department than you probably realize, because we are often tasked with the same, well, you all are spending money and we're not seeing it in the bottom line. Even though they are, it's just spread out over sales and employees and hiring and everywhere else because it impacts the entire business.
It's interesting to think of it from a give me 1 second, Chris. When you're looking at dollars, it doesn't have to be sales and revenue, right? There are dollars that come up in other ways in terms of value and ROI, and some of those things are retention, turnover. Carolyn brought up in the chat, internal comms often supports open enrollment. If you are not from the US, it's a weird healthcare thing that Americans have to do every year. That still makes no sense to me. But that is a very common tactic or strategy or piece of the puzzle that internal comms supports. Is there a direct dollar amount associated with revenue coming in? Maybe not, but there is potentially a dollar amount with people screwing it up. So there's the flip side of that too, of like, maybe not, like Chris, you mentioned earlier, saving money, or maybe it's preventing loss is part of it too.
And especially with, depending on the business you're in, and if you're doing a lot of comms with retail, there's so much turnover, even a lot of turnover in more of the white collar, job behind a computer, where internal comms can affect that, right? And if you've got data around how much it costs to recruit a new person, right, or what all, you got HR costs, you've got technology, you've got training, right, all of that exponential cost every time you have a new person. And if you can prove the internal comms, right, obviously there's net promoter scores and all those sorts of measurables to say, hey, when we communicate with people, and again, back to any kind of benchmark data from an industry standpoint, use all of that as your, I can't remember who was just there on the chat, but same thing, like open enrollment, right? Like that is your data point, that is your revenue, quote unquote, and be able to, even if you're not asked to report back on that, take the pro action to report on that, right? Start to figure out within your departments and businesses what that means. When I started in the business, I kept my own spreadsheets on the side because I soon found out that the salespeople where I was didn't want to give credit to marketing for lead generation because it affected their dollars. So they were putting false data into our CRM. So I had to keep my own thing to essentially prove my value and worth. So I would assume there's similar things from a internal comm standpoint where keep your own information, and when you're not getting the traction you want on the seat at the table, the conversation, the budgets, pull that up. So that's kind of your internal pitch, right?
Yeah.
And at some point, you can only fight an uphill battle with a leadership team or with a company or with coworkers that don't want to believe in your worth so much. And you need to figure out what your personal line is of, this is where I'm done fighting, and I'm just going to put my head down and take orders until I can find a better gig or do something different. Yeah. Because we've all been there. We've all had that bad job. We've all had that bad spot where we just have to decide to do the thing until we can get somewhere else.
Yeah, so and use that data you're collecting on your resume when you go somewhere else, right? I mean, just because your business doesn't, listen to that or care about that stuff, keep your own data and records, because those type of data points will be huge. You'll find the right next job by accounting for the things that they're not letting you do in this job, right? So keep all of that information and use that to your advantage in the future.
Even if it is qualitative, not quantitative. So if someone sends you an email commending you on something, put that in a Google Doc and save it and keep that, put it on your website, your portfolio, whatever. So the data is awesome. And I want to talk about data. But the anecdotal evidence of you doing a great job, whether it's even reaching out and asking people for like LinkedIn recommendations and things like that. Okay, Lanice is actually reading my mind. Not the first time this has happened. So I want to talk about this measurement piece because we've talked a lot about the ROI and the data. We do have to choose better metrics, and I know that it can be more difficult. I fully acknowledge that for internal communications, the metrics sometimes are harder to find, but I am also confident they are out there. Finance and marketing analytics people can help with this. She's right. So what I would love to know from both of you are, what are some of the metrics that marketing gathers that we may be able to co-opt here as internal communicators? Are there either specific tools that you use, drop the names, or are there just strategies and tactics that you use to gather data as a marketing person that someone could easily implement internally as well?
Chris, do you want to go first, or do you want me to jump in? Because I know we both have a lot here.
Go for it.
So I would say look for the data that is already being collected that happens to be adjacent to your internal comms. And what I mean by that, for example, is if your company is already doing NPS with customers, usually there's the option to have comments in those NPS. Every single time an employee is mentioned, that is an internal comms win, because that employee knew what was going on. They knew how to help that customer, and they were able to help that customer well.
That's
and
a
that is
huge
an internal
tip.
comms win.
Everyone's got to take that tip. Yeah. That's a huge, easy win. If someone comments positively on a specific employee at your organization, that is an internal comms win. I love that. I mean, I love that.
Yes, search and reviews, and
yes,
maybe not to the Yelp kind of thing, but there's all kinds of places where people are leaving public comments about your business. Yeah.
Yes. Similarly, Glassdoor, which I know is the bane of some of your existence because you have problems on it, and I get it. But every single positive review on Glassdoor from new, existing, or even past employees is also an internal comms win, because that's somebody saying that they liked it and they knew enough about the things that you were communicating. Because if somebody says they have an incredible health plan and they really took care of me, congratulations, internal comms. You communicated open enrollment incredibly well to that person.
Fantastic.
So there's a lot of adjacencies where you may not think, oh, this isn't an internal comms stat. This is a stat of the business, but that's still a win on your part. I mean, if you're in the financial industry, we call it the ALCO meeting, the assets liabilities meeting. It's the most boring meeting you have ever been in your entire life.
Like it. Yeah.
It's so boring. And you hear everything about how the business is actually doing, and that can inform a lot of how you're measuring things. And every industry I've been in has some equivalent of that. It might be your financials meeting. It might be, if you're in FIs, your ALCO meeting. It might be if you're in higher education, your admissions meetings, and you're talking about summer melt and how many students are and aren't coming. Like, there's always a meeting where somebody talks about the business of the business. And there's almost always some stat, some number, something there that will tell you how every single department is doing.
The chat is like, we're all making notes here, is what's happening.
Yeah, and my world's a little more in the kind of tools and tech side of things, right? And so I would say, don't rely on. I'm talking through Chris, with Chris and some stuff. Don't get in the, well, I got to use SharePoint, right? Or I have to use these things. You have the ability as internal comms to get probably better data than marketing even does, especially now with all of the security measures and
go on. We're
iOS.
listening.
So as an end user, right, you can block anybody that you want to block anymore, right? Or they're anonymizing data and all these things. Whereas from internal comms, you've got the list of people. They have to kind of listen to you, right? You can then use those marketing tools. Essentially, it's an opted-in list, right? They're not going to unsubscribe from the internal comms things. Don't use your typical Outlook emails, right? If there is, maybe regulations, things of that nature, but look to marketing tooling. You've already got the list of people. You'll have a lot cleaner data, and it'll probably even look better. It'll give you some more leeway from a creative standpoint. You can then probably piggyback even on marketing's, licenses and things like that, right? So figure out ways that you can get a sub account, or you get discounts. It's not even like you have to go spend a lot of budget on these things, because they probably exist in other parts of the business. But you'll get a lot cleaner data. I know Mr. Ghost, if he's still in the chat, we'll probably drop a link to softwares and tools and technology specific to internal comms. But yeah, you should get a lot cleaner data than marketers do, frankly, because marketing is going to give you a lot of those metrics, and I could talk for hours about how much they're crap. They're not accurate, right? They're auto open, they're auto click, they're IT departments, they're iOS, right? It's all junk data. And so you internally can kind of force a little more the survey fill outs, right, in these feedback loops and things like that. So take advantage of that fact, where marketers would be jealous of some of the data that you can gather, frankly.
Yeah. Although Lenise does point out, not with SharePoint. Ain't no data on SharePoint, that's for sure.
Kristen already warned me about that.
Yeah, everyone loves SharePoint. They don't. We have SharePoint therapy in Ecology. If you're a Microsoft user, we don't call it SharePoint therapy anymore, but it is called Microsoft 365 Study Hall. We have a separate group for people who get to / have to work with Microsoft at work.
What about like the forms tool? You could probably, again, it's going to take a lot more manual work. There's probably ways around it. It's a pain. So sorry to everybody on SharePoint.
Well, and it's also a matter of what are vanity metrics versus what are actionable metrics, because you can usually figure out metrics up one side and down the other. And if you're not actually going to be able to do anything with them or tell a story with it, don't bother pulling that data in unless it takes zero additional effort. I can't tell you how many people have asked, well, how many followers do we have, without paying a single bit of attention to stuff like engagement rates and click-through rates and all of the things that actually matter.
Yes, absolutely. And on that note, this is also a good segue into talking about different audiences, because that's a big part of the metrics and setting that stuff up. And I think what marketing, in my experience anyway, and some ways PR, but any agency I've worked with does an exceptional job. That's one of the first conversations you're having with them, is about audience or audiences, plural. I've told the story a number of times at different events I've done, that the first time I ever worked with a marketing agency on a television ad campaign, that was one of the first conversations we had. We talked about audience, and we said to them, well, our audience, this was with a healthcare regulator in Canada. We said, well, our audience is the general public. And they were like, no, it's not. And we were like, no, it is. It really is. That's who we're targeting. Adults. We'll segment to adults. And they were like, nope, not good enough. And it was really the first time I'd ever gone through a lengthy, in-depth exercise to define that our audience was Linda, who's 52 years old, caring for her mother, like all very specific audience segmentation. Doesn't mean other people aren't going to see it, but it means you've got to work to define who that audience is. What does that look like from an internal standpoint? Because I suspect many internal comms people, myself included, are guilty of saying, well, our audience is all of our employees. You have 10,000 employees. You can't possibly, or can you? And maybe that's a better question. Is that a valid audience, just every employee, whether you have 1,000 or 10,000? Or is there a way to segment more?
There's a difference between the strategic audience and the tactical audience. Your strategic audience might be that you need to reach all employees, but that says absolutely bupkis about your tactical audience, because every single group of employees is going to interact with and engage with and input information into their brains in a different way. And so if you're saying our audience is everybody, then you are not going to be successfully communicating. But I've seen a lot of success with, if you're breaking out employees, not necessarily according to everybody's favorite thing to hate on, generations, but instead according to how they are accessing information most often, then it seems like you can have a lot more success, because you're going to have the employees that are on LinkedIn 24/7, no matter what you do. 8 times out of 10, that's your C-suite. And you're going to have the audience that opens their email once a week on the shared computer in the shop, because that's all they have. And you cannot communicate to those two groups the exact same way.
Yeah, it's spot on there. I don't have a ton to add, other than you probably have some sort of an org chart, right? And people may or may not have emails, depending on what part of the chart they fall in. But that's an easy way to figure out, segmenting. Just even if all you're doing is segmenting kind of the last sentence, the call to action, or the subject line, right? It doesn't have to be a completely customized piece of communication for everything. Whether that, again, maybe you've got an internal network on a chat system like a Slack, right, or a Discord, or you have a Facebook group, or you've got, again, LinkedIn. You can do the same message with a slight tweak for each group and have it feel unique enough that it's going to at least get them to stop scrolling or get them to pay attention when they get the notification, right? Where people ignore stuff is when you send the one to all the same thing, and they're like, "Yeah, this isn't for me," right? I maybe, like to Andrea's point, I'm on the shop floor and I don't care, right? Like, I'm just ready to punch out and leave. So you do need to have some differentiation there for sure.
I mean, my favorite way to explain this to CEOs or anybody else who's saying like, "Oh, we don't need a segment." It's like, okay, would you text your 87-year-old mother the exact same way that you would talk to your 17-year-old daughter? Because if you're going to communicate with those two people the exact same way, then okay, yeah, you might have an argument. But 9 times out of 10, that's not going to be the same. And we have different audiences in our life, in our everyday life. So why do we treat work differently?
Right, right. What are some of the ways that marketing accesses resources or data from an industry standpoint? Are there like go-to, like how do we benchmark things? Because that's another thing internal people struggle with is, because of the very nature of what we do, it is internal. There's less of a ability sometimes or desire to share what's going on within our organizations. That's why groups like Ecology are really helpful. But I'm curious, from a marketing standpoint, is it easier for marketing people to have access to that kind of information in terms of click-through rates and engagement rates and things like that? Or is that also a bit of a myth?
Yeah, there's a lot of studies out there. You have to sort of, again, you have to know who's putting that stuff out there, right? If it's an email tool, like, again, who's funding it, what's behind it. So yeah, there are some things there, but really, if you're looking more, I tend to try to look historically internally, so even if it's like working on behalf of a client, what have they done in the past and what are their numbers? And again, back to Andrea's earlier points, right? What are they trying to accomplish? So
it's like looking at your own benchmarks in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and again, and creating them if you don't have them, you'll be better off to start to gather something, and start to figure out what that looks like for you, as opposed to saying, oh well, because right, every company of different, even of the similar sizes, you're going to have different departments, different structures. Even at, if you're 300 people, right, that 300 person down the street is going to have different people, titles are different. So I would look to spend the time internally as opposed to, Chat GPT and Google searches to try and get that data. So I wouldn't trust it.
And it's also a matter. So yes, marketers do have access to a lot of data, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's good data or it's useful data. So for example, one of the things that I get asked on a very regular basis are things like, well, is our click-through rate on this ad average? And to tell you the honest truth, it depends entirely on how you're measuring average, because there's the mean, there's the median, there is the by industry, or there is overall. So one tool that I use is called Rival IQ. They do a lot of studies about social media engagement rates and social media rates. And one of the things that they pointed out, I actually just looked it up, is, for example, they did a study of LinkedIn and they found that an average brand engagement rate on LinkedIn is 4.7%. Okay, cool, great. But only 5% of brands manage to get above that. And it's because the engagement rates were so high on that other side. So really, like Chris was saying, when you measure the internal rates, then you have a much, much better benchmark, because no audience is exactly like your audience. And yeah, you do have to look around for places like Ecology, or finding what data you can and asking how they got to that number. Because you can find 1.5 million lists that say the benchmark blah of blah is blah. Okay, cool. How did you measure that? Because I'm the kind of nerd that reads the US Time Used survey for fun. And let me tell you, when it says the average person spends like 2.3 hours a week cleaning, there are a lot of people who spend a lot less than that, and a
Right.
few people who spend a lot more.
Yeah. The other thing I always recommend to people is to rely more, because most people don't rely on them, on your vendor partners. So,
Yes.
with the exception probably of SharePoint, because SharePoint doesn't measure anything, like whatever you're using internally, whether it's an email program or an app or an intranet or whatever, like get to know your account rep or whoever it is at that company that you work with. And if you don't know the person, then that's also a challenge. Like, then figure that out, because they've got data from all of their customers. So there might be some benchmarks there that at least it's like, hey, for everyone using our software, here's what you can expect. Here's a reasonable number. Here's our averages. Here's where you benchmark. And those folks would usually love to help you increase your numbers, because it's win-win. You want to increase your numbers because you want to show the ROI on this piece of software and get people more engaged in reading and listening to and paying attention to your content. The vendor would like you to renew. So there's win-win. They would be happy to help you go through those numbers and figure out what they mean and how you can improve them, at least in my experience.
And another step on that, not only do they want you to renew, they would love case study content, right?
Totally.
So if you allow them in,
Yep.
not only will they do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, you get some kudos, the business gets kudos, and they get to then tell everybody how great their thing is. Use that to your advantage as well.
Yep. And I will also throw in a completely unrelated to the marketing conversation. If you are someone who wants to get into speaking at events, attending conferences, things like that, and your company has a tight budget or no budget for it, that's also a great way to get your name in there, because software companies are often looking for customers who will speak on their behalf about the success that they've seen with their program. So I will also throw that out there as a little tidbit here. All right, folks, we've got a few minutes left. We've covered an obscene amount of ground here. If anyone has last questions, please throw them in the chat. I want to maximize the time that we've got with Chris and Andrea. In the meantime, what is a marketing lesson that you would love for internal communicators to adopt? I'm putting you both on the spot here.
My biggest thing that I still catch myself every day on is you aren't, what you like isn't what the audience needs to hear, right? Like, you aren't the audience. So it's probably even tougher as an internal person, because you figure, oh, we all work at the same company. What I picked up in that C-suite, strategy brief or discussion, or I'm at the table and I heard this, might not be, again, what the line person or what the retail worker or the part-timer cares about. So back to, what are we trying to accomplish? Who are we talking to? What you disseminate out to the masses, your internal masses, might not be a thing that you care about, right? Your department might be a couple people. Your brain might work entirely different than everybody else. So step outside of the, what you heard and what they need to hear and what you need to accomplish. It's super, super hard. It's just the nature of human beings. But if you can step out of your shoes and step into who you're talking to, you'll see great results with it.
That's a great point. I think we also, as internal comms people, forget how much access to information we have that most other employees do not. So that is in line with that. Rhonda, who's been in the chat here with us, one of our members, just did a presentation at Camp Ecology a couple of weeks ago where she called undercover comms. And she was talking about being a, call it whatever you want, frontline, deskless, whatever employee with the Cubs. It was a fantastic presentation and talking about what it's like to be an employee, because many of us in comms and marketing, like we haven't been in that role for probably a while, and what it's like to be that front-facing, customer interacting employee and the information that you're getting from the top. So anyway, that's a great point, Chris. Andrea, go ahead.
A quick interesting similarity, if any of you know Sweetwater Sound, they're in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And they actually, before you become a salesperson, you have to work on the packaging line. You have to work in customer service. Like, you can't take that role until you experience that stuff. So job shadowing, if you want to call it that, right, to go learn what the frontline people are doing, that's a really cool thing. But that's how, and they are a huge success in great part because of that program.
That's great.
So mine would be also my life advice, which is ask more questions intentionally, which is a whole thing. And, I could go on about that for hours, but if you are not asking questions and challenging your own assumptions on a very regular basis, then there is probably some kind of echo chamber that you don't even realize you're caught in. And that could be everything from asking people, how do we make this conference more comfortable for you? And realizing that having both chairs with arms and chairs without arms is great for accessibility. It's the same thing for asking what seems like the stupid, silly, weird, different, odd question that you're going to look at, people are going to look at you for asking. Be the person to ask that, because not only do people like you more and see you as more intelligent, you're going to find out things that you didn't even know you needed to ask. And that is great.
If you follow Andrea on Instagram, she asks a question every single day. And it always makes me think. It always makes me think. Also, Chuck is slandering Chris here. This is niche Indiana slander content. Chris lives in South Fort Wayne. Okay, it's getting out of hand here. I am immensely grateful to both of you. Thank you so much for spending time with all of us today. This has been recorded. It's available on LinkedIn for the regular existence of the internet, whenever that might be in America. And also in Inside Ecology. I always post the recording Inside Ecology for folks too. Andrea is a member of Ecology. You are welcome to DM her if you're a member there. Both of these lovely people have wonderful conversations that, wait, I'm reading something at the same time as I'm talking. Both of these people have wonderful companies that you can have conversations with, that you can find them online. Andrea at tinytall.co, unicoi.social, because we're not .comming anything apparently anymore. Chris is available at bullpen.consulting. They are both on LinkedIn and active on LinkedIn. If you would like to connect with them, I'm sure they would be happy to do so. Make sure you add a little note about how you met them today. And of course, more than anything else, I would love to have you join Ecology. We are a community of internal communicators. We have the most fun and do the most learning, both virtually and in person. If you are in internal comms and you are looking for your people, you have found them here. So we would love to have you there as well. It is $20 a month or $200 a year. So an accessible price point as well. Thank you again to both of you. Wonderful, wonderful afternoon to spend with you. I hope everyone got something out of this. Now there's more talk about Fort Wayne in the chat, so we can all go have those conversations. Thank you to both of you. Everyone have a wonderful day, and we will see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.